Right, allow us to also engage our panelists already in the studio to talk to us about a raft of issues, starting with the drought, of course, and also the sentiments by Kalonzo Musyoka. Allow me to introduce to you Honorable Jakoyo, who is the Member of Parliament from GEM, also the Deputy Leader of the Deputy Majority Leader of the National Assembly. Also, we have with us Billow, who is Senator from Mandera. We have with us Herman Manyora, who is a political analyst and also a lecturer at the University of Nairobi. And also we have Moses Kuria, Gatundu South Member of Parliament. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this morning. Right, a raft of issues we've raised there. First of all, let's tackle the issue of drought, because we've been talking about drought in this country. It seems every year we are on the same page when it comes to the first quarter of the year. We have a looming drought, and we seem to just be facing the same problem. Let's begin with you, Honorable Jakoyo.
Well, I have just seen the CS for agriculture saying by the end of the week, if the situation continues,
yes,
they will decide whether to import grains. I mean, there's so much disconnect, because I thought the weatherman already said the situation will continue until April.
Yes.
So why can't they just... But by now, they should have imported. Debarl, I was in the village until last night. There's no water. It's hot. And you have seen in the north, animals are dying, trying to look for grazing fields. How much more time do we need as a government to know that things are dire? I didn't think that was right for the CS to say. I think it's very bad. And we should have known, because I was in Uganda late last year.
Yes.
And Uganda was already experiencing the same thing. So we should have known it is coming our way. I think we need to do a bit more to save the situation. Yeah.
Right. Honorable Billow, Kerrow, we think this is poor planning from the government?
No doubt, very poor planning. The government, if you look at the government strategy documents
yes,
that were presented to the climate conference in Marrakesh and even in Paris, there is an undertaking that by 2019 there will be no drought emergencies in Kenya. The government would have, undertaken a series of interventions that will ensure there will be no more emergencies, really. In other words, drought is there in many countries in the world, but people plan in such a way that there should be no emergency. This happens in North African countries which are deserts. So it's not really, for example, what he just said, that we knew the short rains were inadequate. Yes. By end of October, November, everyone knew it. So planning should have been in place really to provide water and food particularly. And it's not about animals. I think what we saw in Turkana is people really about to lose their lives. But it's not only on the national government. I also think the county governments are to blame, because county governments are now on the ground. You do no longer have to wait for Nairobi. I mean, they have annual budgets. They have people in the administrators in the wards, in the sub-counties. They should have planned. There's a provision. I think there's an arrangement where counties, particularly in those arid areas, should have provided at least 2% of their budget for emergencies. As early as 2013, Kenya Red Cross submitted a template legislation for emergencies for counties, so that they can provide for emergencies, they can provide for droughts, and even go into outsource that work if they want to institutions like Red Cross and others. But you find a situation where a county, say like mine or Turkana or any of these other ones in the north, with livestock as the single most important source of livelihood, the amount of budget being set aside for livestock, really, which includes, of course, providing water dams and so forth, is less than 5%. In fact, in all the counties in these arid areas and semi-arid areas combined, the total amount of money that they have set aside for the livestock sector, which is the single most important, would have provided for hay, would have provided for water, would have provided for many other forms of intervention, is less than 5%. I mean, so there's significantly significant underestimation, really, in terms of the challenges that these sectors face, and the provisions by counties themselves, as well as the national government. So I think we have a serious problem, really, in this area.
What is the role of the National Drought Management Authority?
They alert. They provide assessments, and they provide, they alert the relevant government institutions that there is an alert, there is an emergency, there is the different levels of threats, and so they submit monthly reports using the early warning system, institution that they have, to alert the relevant institutions in government that they need to plan, because this particular county is at this stage of an emergency. This one is at this stage, and so forth. So they do provide that information for the purpose of coordination, really.
All right. In the face of the National Irrigation Board that we have in this country, and we expect, of course, the particular areas that are deemed to be arid areas and semi-arid areas should be well irrigated. Do you think the National Irrigation Board, of course, with the politics that has been also mired within this particular board, are they doing a sterling job in trying to also make sure this country has a good basket areas or food basket areas where they should? Maybe the northern part of this country, the arid and semi-arid areas of this country. Herman.
There was a time we had something like NIB, National Irrigation Board. It is remembered for irrigation schemes, I think, in Mwea and some other places. But it died a natural death. It was strangled by corruption and bad governance. I'm ashamed, Debarl, that I am a citizen of a country that in the 21st century can allow its citizens to starve to death. It's really embarrassing. Debarl, only a few months ago, farmers in this country were demonstrating. First, for lack of market, nobody was buying their produce, the maize especially, and rice and wheat. Then later, when the National Cereals and Produce Board began buying maize, they were again up in arms and demonstrating because of the poor prices. So you ask yourself, if we are going to import maize, will we spend less than we would have spent if we had paid our farmers well? You know, farming in this country is caused sometimes by misplacement. So that there's one part of the country with excess food, another part of the country people are dying. You see what I'm talking about? We are facing starvation because of simple things like inability to move food, simple things like post-harvest losses, very primitive things that other people have taken care of. I think as a country, we must save ourselves this kind of shame that 2 million Kenyans are facing starvation. When you watch on television and see the cracked earth, emaciated children, animals barely walking, carcasses all over, you feel ashamed of being a Kenyan. Why would this happen in the 21st century? Remember now we have a drought fund. Is it 21 billion, something like that? A short while ago, there was El Nino fund, 15 billion. Where did that money go? Yes. Because El Nino never came. I mean, unless Kenyans stop using every available opportunity to eat and steal from us, we will die a very shameful death as people. Look, apart from the road and energy sector, the water sector is receiving billions of shillings. I think it's unknown to Kenyans. There are billions of Kenya shillings pumped into dams. I hear there's one, is it Kituyu, going for about 207 billion. There is so much money going into dams. What is really happening in this country? When shall we stop being primitive thieves and then suffer? If Kuria is in Italy and they introduce themselves as a Kenyan, people just laugh. You come from a country where people are dying of starvation in the 21st century, a country so well endowed like Kenya. We must move out of that shame.
All right, Moses Kuria, looking at how many water boards do we have in this country? Around 11 of them, right? We can see also right now there's an effort to try and revive the Uma Dam as well. In the face of this, and also when we talk about the Turkana expanse of it, the large expanse of Turkana that has water aquifers beneath it, that could afford this country enough cubic metric cubic metric liters of water in this country. Should we be ashamed? And we don't know what is happening, especially in terms of planning on how we can harness this water from the ground?
First of all, what is happening today in terms of the investment in irrigation is also manifestation of raw investment that has gone into this sector historically. As a matter of fact, I think we should be proud of the many water projects that Manyora is talking about here, because barely 5 years ago, there was no project worth calling a project in terms of irrigation. And it's true, there's a lot of money being pumped there. And we should be happy that something is happening now, not condemn it because it has not happened historically. It's the same thing like in the security sector, whereby it is apparent from the surveys of it as if a lot of resources are going there. But it's just a manifestation of the low investment that has gone historically.
But the question is, how effective are they? How effective are they?
I don't think we can talk about the effectiveness, because most of them, and by the way, the age of the oldest project is barely 3 years. So they are still coming on board. There is no project. Just tell me one project that has been completed over the last 3 years. Most of them are at the investment phase. So it is still too early to talk about the effectiveness of it. But talking about the issue of the food security in general, people who have been on the scene for a long time, like Billow can tell you, that in the early 90s, that's where the rain started beating us. When we had too much liberalization of the grain sector. And I remember I wrote an article in the newspapers in the year 1993 about the dangers of a rapid liberalization of the grain sector. And some of those things we are paying for today. Now, Kerrow talks about why is the minister talking now about importation. I think we are not at that situation whereby we can say it is too late, because looking at the SGR. SGR is not the standard gauge railway. It used to be the strategic grain reserve. So before you make the decision to import, you must look at that inventory point within your SGR that says now you are running too low on your stocks, on your strategic grain reserve.
But this is barely even 5 months after the deputy president told the country that we have enough maize reserve in this country. We don't need to import. To
go up to that point whereby Mr. Weatherman was saying that is a crisis point. That is looking at our strategic grain reserve. And we have not yet depleted our strategic grain reserve, even as we stand. And we are still around 2 to 3 months away on our strategic grain reserve, for us to be on a crisis mode. But to fail to plan is to plan to fail. That we are saying now, looking at what there is in the market.
5 people have died.
Looking at
5 people have died, and we've not exhausted our strategic grain reserves.
In which counties?
So how do we keep these grains? And of course, people have died so far.
In which counties, for example? Just mention counties.
We have people. Is it in Mandera where people have actually reported?
Mandera. Let's stop it. That's Mandera, Marsabit.
Just a moment.
They've mentioned.
Marsabit, they've mentioned.
Very good. Yes. Let's look at the Equalization Fund. When we're in Parliament, the deputy leader of minority is here, and we are discussing the issue of Equalization Fund. We can barely speak because we are drowned by voices from Marsabit, from Mandera. So where does this money go? I don't get Equalization Fund in Gatundu.
No.
I'm not sure you get
let me ask you a simple question.
We can't have our cake and eat it.
Just a moment.
So when we come to Equalization Fund, we say, because of mitigating drought.
No, just a moment. But
when it comes now to drought,
where do we have the discretion between politics of Equalization Fund and a strategic
what is Equalization Fund
when people are dying?
What is Equalization Fund supposed to achieve? And by the way, this thing of when, for example, we are allocating money for agriculture. I sit in the budget committee. He sits in the finance committee of the Senate. And it comes now to the issue of counties, for example. We are told, why are you allocating so much money to the national government for agriculture? And agriculture is a devolved function. When drought comes, it becomes a national function. When it's money for agriculture, it becomes a default function.
But these politicians are playing with death. Look at it this way. I come from a place that receives very high rainfalls. And we never expect rainfalls. Jakoyo will tell you it is true. We don't expect rainfalls in December, January. So what is going on as far as drought is concerned is a normal thing. Now, even if we got rain today, it cannot translate into food in 3 months' time. Because Kuria is telling us the strategic reserve can last us up to around 3 months from now. So even if we received rain, if I hear these days there are people who pray for rain. Supposing they prayed for rain and it failed today, Moses Kuria, we cannot have food in 3 months' time. Meaning we are already, I think we are jokers.
You know those things are supposed to work together.
Kuria, we must stop being jokers.
Okay,
Let me finish something I want to say.
Yes.
The point I want to make is this. I live in this country and I've lived in for a while now. Sometimes when you have shortage of sugar, or in this case maize, it is a strategy by people. It is an artificial shortage, a creation by people, so that the government may allow them to import these things duty-free. And in 2 months or 3 months, a guy has made 6 billion. They have distributed among 10 people. They are happy, and they sing up to elections in 2018. Please, Moses Kuria, Billow, Kerrow, Jakoyo, Midiwo, you are politicians. Don't play with the lives of Kenyans. At one point, these people will eat you alive. Please. Sometimes we have experienced shortages, and when you look at it,
all right,
because if you went to Eldoret today, the grain area of this country,
okay, let's hear from just a moment.
Is it wrong to import maize?
If supposing we have enough here,
yeah,
but somebody like Moses Kuria or Manyora is creating an artificial shortage so that he can make
how is that being done?
It has been done many times.
Just a moment.
Sugar
How is it being done
just a moment.
You know these things,
just a moment,
Moses. The academia just shouting things out. How is it being done?
Kuria, you are old enough to know that is true.
Okay, just a moment. Let's hear from Jakoyo and then we come to Billow.
Kuria,
you know that is true.
Now, by the way, who is Moses Kuria sitting in for in this show today?
On behalf of Wabatangi and Bode Halwale, who are into they are away, of course.
Moses, Equalization Fund.
3 people.
Equalization Fund has never been disbursed. Up to now,
yeah,
your government has refused to give poor people money. And you are going to pay for it in August. Trust me. The Constitution allocated money. Parliament, provision. Parliament is ready to allocate money. Just through the Ministry of Finance. You know now what they're doing about Equalization Fund? Mm-hmm. They're saying they're doing public hearing before they can give poor people money. Secondly, Equalization Fund is not for drought mitigation. This is a national disaster. Disasters are a responsibility of the national government.
Not county government?
Not county government.
Is it county government supposed to allocate
let him finish. Just let him finish.
It must.
Yeah?
County government can do it, but does not have capacity. This is a new government. You know, why is everything going so wrong that didn't go wrong during the coalition government or during the first Kibaki government? Why? You know, there's something wrong with the government, and let us accept it to correct it. You know, there was this thing called Galana. Mm-hmm. Wasn't it supposed to create food security? Now we're talking about importation because some political crooks have looted using that project. And if I'm wrong, I want to be corrected. That project with the irrigation, money put in it, lost money. It was supposed to create food security. In fact, we were even supposed to export grains to the Middle East. When you saw Netanyahu come here and he didn't visit there, you can only be stupid not to know that somebody told him, don't you put your neck on that failed project. Why are we going to import? We have put billions in this thing in the coast. Where is the maize? You know, this government cannot let Kenyans die and begin, Moses, please, to blame, these governors. Most of them have no idea what they're doing.
Right, but we've
so
seen also
by that admission that they don't know what they're doing.
All right, let's hear from Billow Kerrow. Billow Kerrow, Galana Kulalu project, has it failed? Because also we know it was embroiled in some politics before. And we saw also the Agriculture Committee. Some of them, as we were given to understand, were airlifted to Mombasa. And the queries about the whole scam about Galana Kulalu project was quelled after they came from Mombasa. So there was no report that was given from there.
I'll come to Galana, but let me just clarify one point that was mentioned earlier about the reason why people are dying of starvation. It has nothing to do with lack of or shortage of food in the strategic grain reserves. I think even if we had all the maize in the reserves, the people who are being affected by hunger, people who have lost their livelihoods, they have lost their livestock because of the drought. So they need an intervention where this is poverty. It's about giving people food because they can't afford, even if you flooded all the shops, you know, in that part of the country. So I think the governments at both levels have an obligation to provide for their citizens, and I think that is what the challenge is about. I do agree that both county and national government have an obligation. It doesn't make sense for a county government to spend billions building offices when the residents in their counties are starving. I think they need to prioritize.
To have idle cash in the
bank. They need to prioritize. We've just seen how much money is lying in those accounts. But let me come to the issue of the I think both the Galana Reserve, the Galana Irrigation Scheme, and the Equalization Fund, I think failure to implement both has been a function of Parliament. It's really the intrigues within Parliament that delayed the implementation.
Thank you.
It's about, for example, in Equalization, it's about National Assembly wanting to control the funds in the same way they control CDF instead of sending it to the county governments. In the case of the Galana, I think also the challenge, I think, with Jubilee government has been ambition, really wanting to do so much when they should have really, because what the consultants have always argued is that for Galana they need to go in stages, and you can't just have 1 million acres of irrigation at once. But I think clearly there are issues around Galana that the relevant Committee of Agriculture and I think National Assembly, as indeed is with many others, including the sugar industry and many others, that they have not really come out very clearly on, and Kenyans need to know really what's going on. And it's about the leadership really in National Assembly to come out clearly and tell Kenyans
Should we not have accountability right now when people, in the face of people dying, losing 5 Kenyans because of the issue of drought should not be happening in this epic of time also, even in our country, right?
In the Bill of Rights,
yes,
the government is accountable, and residents in those areas have a right. They can go to court and actually sue the government. That is possible. I know even before this constitution in 2006,
yes,
I engaged the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights to take the government to court because some people died in my constituency for lack of food. I think there is an obligation on the government, and to the extent that is not able to, they are accountable. They are not just accountable politically, but they are accountable even legally. That's an action that can be taken.
Right. Let's hear from Professor Herman Manyora.
We can debate here and argue very well, but Kenyans are dying. Livestock is being wiped out because of drought. And something I wanted to say just before you cut me short last is that, for example, where I come from, I can tell you for sure if there is shortage of food, both in terms of the scarcity and using pricing. But as I sit here, there isn't anything to indicate there's a shortage of food in this country. Mm-hmm. So as Billow Kerrow says, first, even if you had the food, you will be taking it to Kenyans who do not have the capacity to buy. Mm-hmm. Now, the Jubilee government tells us that things are doing very well. The economy is doing wonderfully. If the economy was doing well, then the situation Billow Kerrow talks about would not obtain, that we will have Kenyans who can afford food. So there is food, there is a sizable population of Kenyans who cannot afford this food even if you give them. The animals are dying because of drought. In the face of extreme expenditures, heavy borrowing by the government to construct huge dams, huge only in books. Kuria says rightly that it's only 3 years. Lakini Waswahili wanasema siku njema huonekana asubuhi. At least you should have an indicator that we are going somewhere. Kuria, I wish to point out to you that as far as these projects of dams is concerned, we are not getting anywhere. I can see from far. Because you do the most immediate thing. Arguing against the Galana Kulalu project, I argued this way. I said, instead of going to irrigate maize, you can't begin with irrigation of maize. you irrigate whole culture. Instead of doing that, why can't we help the farmers in the food basket of this country? Farmers lose their produce because of very simple things. The inability to dry their maize when there's rain. Lost in the farm to rodents and other pests. Lack of storage. Simple things like, if you did these things to the people in the North Rift in this country, and ensure there is a market for their produce, because these fellas are also then discouraged, because as soon as they harvest maize, you can cry if you go there. The National Cereals and Produce Board, which is meant to buy this maize in bulk from farmers, ensures they go to sleep for 2 months. What happens in the 2 months? Middlemen and brokers descend on Moise Bridge, Kitale, Eldoret, and those Tarwa and those areas to buy this maize for a song. Because then the farmers are facing Christmas, the farmers are facing school fees in January. So they have no option but to release this maize at prices that can only make you cry. Then the National Cereals Board comes, then the game begins. They come with low prices. You know, surely, let's not play with the lives of Kenyans.
Okay, let's hear from Moses. We'll come to you, Honorable Billow Kerrow.
Yeah, but, you know, we have to avoid short-termism in this country, where everything is quick fixes, drying, what, you know, just quick bandaging the wound. You know, I'm telling you, Professor. Yeah, yes, you have to do that. But I'm telling you, when I saw this report yesterday, you know, luckily, I've been writing for the last quarter of a century in opinions, and I remember that opinion I wrote to Musalia Mudavadi 24 years ago when he was Minister for Finance, and about the issue of liberalization of many things, including the green sector. And I was saying about the same thing I'm saying today, about short-termism. So when you want to build dams so that we may not benefit today, but at least 5-10 years down the line, we're not going to be in the same situation again. Then you start saying we're not going anywhere. Why are you so cynical? Why are you so myopic? You know, gentlemen, I mean, I know Kenyans fear things which are going to be of benefit when they are dead.
Just a moment.
Kenyans are so selfish. They don't like benefits of things that will come when they are dead.
No.
But so Herman Manyora says that he wants things that are going to benefit when he's alive. But we should be thinking about even things that are going to come.
Just a moment. But aren't we myopic when we have the same situation every year and we still remain none the wiser? Just a moment. We are talking about these dams. It was like how many? 2011. It's almost 6 years since then, when we had Kenya for Kenyans, initiative, trying to also alleviate hunger and raise funds for people who are really dying. You're talking about these dams, but it seems every year, no one, early warnings from the National Drought Management Authority, early warnings, no one has really responded to this. You ask, just a moment, you ask why or what is so wrong with importing maize, and yet we have been assured by the Deputy President that we have enough. Why then should we come 5 months down the line? I ask you questions, we are importing maize.
Wait a minute, Debarl. What we are saying is, and I'm trying to divide between these two levels. The first level is a long term. That once we put these dams in place, we are sure that if this was done 10, 15 years ago, we wouldn't be where we are. If the dams which Manyora is saying are not going anywhere, were done 10, 15 years.
So admittedly, we are myopic.
At least, no.
We are myopic as a country.
We still have got a lot of quick fixes for us to do. But the good thing is, let's not bastardize those initiatives that are going to ensure that in the medium term, we don't get into the same problem.
But what are the timelines for these initiatives? Because it seems like it takes forever for these initiatives to be put in place.
Of course, a project is not making a cup of tea. An irrigation project is not frying an egg. It takes time.
Yeah, it takes time, but time to what? Eternity? We need time frames. I mean, for every plan and project, you have timelines.
If the discussion is on time frames, then we should have said the discussion is time frames, and we get the relevant project plans from the relevant departments. That's another subject altogether. But bastardizing long-term projects, we are going to get us out of
just a moment.
Kuria, the irrigation schemes that were in place when I was in primary school. Look at my age. Sure.
Yes.
Kuria, look at my age.
We're talking about time frames.
One thing, very quickly. You know, first, I think, let us be fair. The reason why the government looked at irrigation and as opposed to the breadbasket area is, for example, in this year alone, we are being told, even today in the media, the maize production in Rift Valley reduced from 21 million bags to 16 million. And the reason is the poor yield is because of low rainfall is one of them. But the government has over the years consistently been trying to reduce the cost of maize production by, subsidizing through fertilizer and many other inputs to the farmers. This is being done both at national and county levels. But still, you find farmers asking for 3,200 shillings per bag that NCPB thinks, looking at the market in East African region and all that, the pricing, really, it's too high. I think that there is a sense in which government has to move away from simply relying on the breadbasket area with the price, despite all the inputs and all whatever. Because if you look across the border in Uganda, the same maize is being produced in the same kind of environment at half the price. So I think this is the reason that informed the government to start looking at irrigation, like in Kulalu and those kind of massive irrigation schemes. But I think I want to agree with you that the challenge in most of this implementation is about the usual problems that we have of implementation, of corruption, and many other issues that bedevil our country. But I don't think you can fault the planning. I mean, of that we must go into irrigation in those arid and semi-arid areas. When Kibaki came in 2013, remember, Professor Anyang and others, they said for every shilling that is going to be invested in arid and semi-arid areas, the government will get a return of 5. But for every shilling you're putting in the areas like the breadbasket and others, you get another shilling. I mean, you get a higher return in the huge parts of this country and this is what the government is trying to do. But unfortunately, I think the challenges we have are those ones of management of our institutions and resources. I think that is where the problem is, not in the planning.
Not in the planning.
Well,
Okay.
but I agree with the senator that there's no lack of planning. But what this particular government is doing, they are reading from Ministry of Planning documents and seeing opportunities for graft. You know, when Moses says we are bastardizing long-term projects, it only takes 3 months to grow maize. In this Galana thing, there has already been produce. There has already been, now it's about 6 seasons of maize growing that we were promised we'll make sure we don't go through what we're going through to mitigate such circumstances. So I don't know which season, it'd be nice to tell Kenyans, at which season do you expect Galana to begin producing or mitigating such circumstances